Hello guys, Winston here. The holidays are coming up, which means a lot of people ought to be unboxing CNCs right about now, and since I happen to have a machine that's basically a blank slate, I figured this would be a good opportunity to make a video about how I personally set up a Shapeoko. Over the years, I've picked up a number of tips or tricks or maybe even superstitions, who really knows at this point, but I wanted to put all these things in one place instead of forcing people to have to comb through my archives to find a specific bit of information. So this is my unofficial guide for getting the most out of your Shapeoko 2019 edition. First off, let's talk about assumptions in machine building. Anytime you bolt something together, there's a chance for slop or twist to creep into your machine frame. But before you put on your tinfoil hat and pull out your granite inspection table, let me say that you really shouldn't be all that paranoid or obsessive about chasing down every last fraction of a millimeter of accuracy in a CNC router kit, especially one that costs less than $2,000 that I bet you a cookie you'll probably build on a wooden workbench and not a welded metal frame table bolted down to a single concrete slab, and that you will probably be primarily machining wood on anyway, which isn't exactly known for its dimensional stability. Practically speaking, the Shapeoko will work just fine however you put it together. If maintaining tolerances that are within 0.1 millimeters all day every day is a matter of life or death for you, well then I will see you in the afterlife because you probably should have gotten a real VMC. That being said, there are some reasonable things you can pursue to improve accuracy. There are also plenty of things I think produce rapidly diminishing returns. I say fix the low-hanging fruit and move on with your life. You bought a CNC to make projects, not to be a project. Okay, getting off the pulpit, the first thing I like to do is make sure my frame is square, at least to within about 2 millimeters corner to corner. To do this, you'll want to just barely loosen all the structural bits in your frame. This means the wasteboard and the rails primarily. Pinch or pull the opposite corners until you have your frame suitably square, then lock the frame by tightening down your wasteboard. Having an extra pair of hands or a ratchet strap may help here. On my machine here, it turned out I really didn't need to do a lot of adjustment at all. Now would also be a good time to adjust your leveling feet if you care about such things. My machine doesn't really have a home and I'm going to be moving it around a lot, so I'm not too concerned about this. Now that we have a foundation to build up the rest of our machine from, let's work our way up. Bolted holes naturally have a little bit of slop in them, so aligning our rails is a worthwhile place to spend some time. But, not too much time, maybe about 5 minutes worth. I want to secure one rail first and use it as a reference to set the other. If you have a level that you trust, you can use that. I, on the other hand, only have my iPhone, and I sure as heck don't trust that. So I'm going to improvise a little spacer of a fixed thickness that I can use to ensure that my rails are parallel to the frame and, by extension, the wasteboard. Sort of. More on that later. Once you have one rail parallel to the frame and locked down, you can use the gantry as its own spacer to ensure that your Y rails are equidistant. You don't want your rails diverging because your machine might end up encountering extra resistance as it moves from one side to the other. Once this is done, I consider my frame to be good enough. The X-axis rail doesn't really need to be adjusted because when you machine level your wasteboard, the resulting surface will be automatically parallel to the X-axis rail. Okay, so now that we have the rails sorted, let's talk about carriages and V-wheels. I personally do not like to assess V-wheel tension based on the rolling resistance of the carriage. I tighten my eccentric nuts until my V-wheels just become difficult to stop with 2 fingers. That way you can very quickly recognize when to stop tightening and avoid deforming the V-wheels. Mind your fingers here, by the way, don't pinch them. Now for belt tensioning. Like with V-wheels, there are few ways to directly assess belt tension, but honestly that's okay because if you just follow the instructions it'll be good enough. Secure one end of your belt first. On the other end, position your belt clip so that it just touches the tensioning screw when you pull the belt taut by hand. Tighten the screw and that's basically it. The belt is going to be just barely strummable, but it's not going to be guitar string tight, and that's fine. If you need an extra bit of tension, you can go back to the first side and give it half a turn, assuming you didn't fully tighten it earlier. Do not buy a longer screw to pull the belt with because you will damage the stepper motor. You can apply plenty of tension with the included hardware. Alright, let's turn our attention to the wasteboard. I always like to put down a sheet of MDF on top of the wasteboard that comes with the machine. Why? Because you really ought to machine level your work surface. Across the machine, in the MDF, or within the space-time continuum, there are going to be small deviations that affect the Shapeoko. You'll have high spots and low spots. If you've ever machined something and cut through it on one side but left an onion skin on the other, or if you've noticed in the Hello World test that you do with a Sharpie when you first get the machine that some areas are missed by the marker, leveling your wasteboard is how you overcome that. Now, if you machine a pocket into your original wasteboard, you'll never be able to lay anything larger than that pocket on your machine. It'll end up sitting on a raised lip. So for the love of G-code, put an extra layer of MDF on top of your wasteboard, or plastic, or T-tracks with MDF panels. Just put something on top. I usually go with MDF, and I like to embed threaded inserts in it. I use the externally threaded kind, and I know some people swear by the pronged T-nut variety that you hammer in. Honestly, they both work just fine. If you're cranking down on a bolt so hard that you strip an externally threaded insert, either you drilled your pilot hole too large, or you should probably look into distributing your clamping pressure over more bolt holes. This is what I made for the stock Shapeoko 3 from 3/4 inch MDF. It provides plenty of margin to be face down, so assuming you take off only a couple thou every season, it should last for years really. The hole spacing is 1.5 inches square because the Carbide 3D low profile vise has a 3-inch center to center hole spacing, and a 1x1 inch hole pattern would just be way too many inserts. The mounting holes to bolt this to a wasteboard are some silly metric measurement in case this gets mounted on a machine with an aluminum table. Yes, I still put MDF on an aluminum table because you should always have something on top that you can face down. The real pro move here though would be to do what JPL Richard did and make your supplementary work surface straight out of aluminum and tap it for whatever you want. Whatever you do, once you no longer have a naked wasteboard, face your work surface down. I like to use a surfacing bit 1 inch in diameter. This one is from Whiteside Router Bits. You can spring for more expensive surfacing bits like ones with inserts or coatings or larger diameters, but on a Shapeoko, I'd rather put that money into more specialized end mills to do other things. This sub $30 cutter works just fine for me. After you surface your wasteboard, you might notice small steps in the surface. This is caused by the spindle being out of tram or not being perfectly perpendicular to your bed. I like to quantify tram error using a simple bar with 2 1/4-inch holes drilled in either end that will clamp onto either rod stock or an end mill. It just needs to be able to spin something off-center. This will exaggerate any error that you have and let you compensate for them. If you have a test indicator that you can mount in a 1/4-inch collet, that is totally okay as well. I would personally not bother spending $100 on one of those dual dial tramming doohickeys. Any improvement you get with those comes at the expense of your sanity. This is a case where having more data, being able to measure a couple tenths of error, really only serves to make you miserable. The small diameter end mills most people will use on a Shapeoko really won't manifest enough tram error to justify spending that much money. Now, if your router is tilted forward or backwards, I like to compensate for this by rotating the X-axis rail in the opposite direction. I'll loosen 3 of the 4 screws on each side fully, and just barely crack the 4th screw. You should have a degree or 2 of adjustment available to you because of the oversized bolt holes in the carriage plates. If there's not enough adjustment here, you can also shim the router mount on the top or the bottom edge with some aluminum foil or shim stock. And since that requires loosening up the router mount anyway, that brings us to the second phase of adjustment for tram. If your router is canted to the left or right, you're going to need to loosen your spindle mount and tweak it a little bit. On machines where the spindle mount bolts onto the front, this is much easier, but we can still make do on the stock Z carriage and mount without too much inconvenience. I like to leave the spindle mount screws just a little tight so that my mount requires a little persuasion to move. Then put your carriage back on the Z-axis rails. At this point, you can stick the router back in the mount and try and adjust for any observed tram error, but I like to just slam the mount itself down on a 1-2-3 block. As long as your blocks are resting across multiple high points in the wasteboard, it will average out to be a flat reference surface. Yes, this method does require the assumption that the router sits perfectly aligned in the mount, but no, I really don't care about a small error if that assumption is wrong. Now, when you take the carriage off the Z-rails, the mount shouldn't move assuming you left the screws holding it snug enough. You can now lock in the orientation by retightening the screws in the back. If you really want to obsess over tram, you could face the wasteboard again and go through this procedure a second time, incrementally getting closer to perfection, or spend $100 on that dual dial indicator thingy, but honestly, I find this to be good enough. I don't even use paper or feeler gauges to try and quantify how trammed in my router is. If I observe a relatively consistent gap under my DIY tram indicator, I'm happy with that. And indeed, when I faced my supplementary wasteboard a second time, I couldn't feel any unevenness in the surface. You can see lines in it, but that's mostly due to how the MDF fibers are matted down by a swirling cutter. This is a more than adequate foundation on which to machine my projects. So this is where I usually stop. This is good enough for me. Anything you cut on this machine will match anything else that's also cut on this machine. Inlays, pieces of boxes, whatever, because it's all relative. If your machine cuts a pocket that's, let's say, 0.5% oversized, The inlay piece you cut will also be 0.5% oversized. It's all linearly scaled. So if you're a one CNC garage shop, I would just stay with the stock axis calibration. But if you have more than one machine and you're trying to interchange parts between them, or your CNC is in a shop where the temperature can fluctuate significantly, you may want to do a little more tuning. The best way to calibrate your machine is to measure its movement directly. A 1-inch dial indicator is okay, but something a little longer would be preferable. There are some pretty affordable indicators with 2 inches of travel available online. If you don't have such a well-endowed dial indicator though, you can always machine a part and measure it to infer your machine's accuracy. This is a test piece I made for just such a purpose. The steps and notches are designed so that you can take multiple readings in like roughly 1/2 inch increments. Well, no, it's more like 19 and 3/32. Fine, I'll admit it, I used metric here, 15mm increments. Are you happy now? Anyway, the toolpath in Fusion to cut this out includes a roughing path, so it does 2 cuts per step down, basically finishing as it goes to eliminate any deflection from cutting. Don't be a muppet who complains that the part they cut out with roughing speeds and feeds isn't accurate. When dimensions matter, always take a finishing pass. Also, keep in mind that wall finishes in soft plastic come out best with conventional cutting. The way you use this calibration piece is as follows. If your part is consistently oversized by a certain ratio, you'll want to scale your default Gerbil settings by the inverse of that percentage. Let's say your machine thinks it's traveling 75mm, but it's actually traveling 1mm more than that. This is a highly unrealistic example, by the way. Your Gerbil settings should be multiplied by the ratio of your desired travel over actual. So 75 divided by 76, that's 0.987 or 98.7%, so you want your CNC to travel 1.3% less to hit the desired distance. Instead of 40 steps per millimeter on the Shapeoko, you should program it to do 39.5. And you should calibrate your X and Y axes independently. Except in the case of Samwise the Scaloko, the accuracy was somehow almost dead on. I was measuring random errors of 1 to 2 thou across a range of distances. This isn't taking into account any potential backlash, as my lone internal feature exhibited closer to 3 to 4 thou of error, but I was happy enough with the results that I chose not to touch the stock machine calibration. And that, my friends, is everything that goes into setting up a Winston spec Shapeoko. It is not the most precise you could make a Shapeoko, and it's not supposed to be. But it's 90% of the way there with none of the headaches or hair loss or heartburn associated with more obsessive pursuits of accuracy. For what the Shapeoko is, I think this is a respectable and more than adequate baseline. I know some of you will inevitably chime in with your own tips and tricks in the comments below, and that's fine, but for those of you who are already looking at this feeling overwhelmed, take a deep breath and remember that a little inaccuracy isn't going to kill you. Don't let yourself become paralyzed by the knowledge that a little imperfection is inevitable. Like, what I'm trying to say is, for lack of a more eloquent way to put this, just shut up and make stuff. Everything is going to be fine. I want to thank you all very much for watching, and I'll be back soon with more CNC content and DIY nonsense.